All righty. Thanks everyone so much for joining tonight. My name's Arielle Dyment. I'm the owner of My Sober Compass, and this is going to be so much fun over the next hour and a half. So I'm a sober coach. I help people build a recovery program that makes sense for their lifestyle, whether they're struggling with alcohol, eating disorder, drugs, etc. And I am so very pleased that Stephen Hayes is joining us today to share his story. So I'd like to give him a quick intro. Stephen owns and founded Stigma podcast. If you guys haven't listened to it yet, we are going to be dropping the link right after the call, and I'd love for you to listen. He's also the founder and managing partner of What If Ventures, which is a venture capital fund that invests in mental health companies, startups. So I know you're going to talk a bit about this, Stephen, but yeah, we're so glad that you're here. Again, this meeting is an hour and a half. I have everyone on mute right now, but if you would like to ask a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat. We will be doing a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Stephen.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for that. And as far as the podcast, we just released an episode this morning of Arielle and I. So that's out there. I haven't even gone to check on it, but it's out there and you can find it everywhere, I think. So I'm excited to be here and excited to share my story with you guys. My story is a story of a lot of different things. It's a story of addiction. It's a story of recovery. It's a story of mental health, mental illness. I live in Texas. I grew up here. I grew up in like a Southern Baptist Christian, go to church 3 times a week family. You know, I didn't drink in high school, didn't party, didn't do anything. I was a swimmer. I worked out really hard. I studied hard. I made good grades. I got into West Point. I went off to college and had never really done anything wrong or bad. And when I got to college, I kind of got into a new world. And the first chance I got, one weekend, I left campus at West Point with my friends, and I drank for the first time. And I drank an entire case of beer by myself. And that's that was my first time I had a problem. And so this started to follow me, right? So like throughout college, every time I could drink, I would drink excessively, and it felt a lot like just partying and binge drinking, like being a kid. And then in my senior year of college, my addiction spread. It spread into gambling. I started gambling from my dorm room, and it took over my life. Like it was aggressive. My parents had to bail me out of debts. It almost kicked me out of college. It was bad. And so I graduated from West Point. I got into the Army, and I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia. I'm in Fort Benning, and the Army is an environment that really kind of fosters drinking and like just male chauvinistic behavior, and especially where I was in the Army, infantry officer, it's just guys being idiots. And so my alcoholism got worse. I started missing formations. I started showing up drunk. And basically one day they were like, we really want to kick you out of the Army, but like you haven't done anything bad enough. And it turns out I had this back injury, and they used it as a chance to throw me out of the Army. So they threw me out of the Army for just being a idiot. But they gave me a medical honorable discharge somehow. So it worked out for me in that respect. But I mean, I guess what I'd say is I was a cadet on 9/11. I was in New York that day. All I wanted to do was join my friends and go overseas and kick ass and take names. That's all I ever wanted to do after that day. And that got taken away from me pretty quickly because of my behavior and because of the choices I was making. And then after that, I went to business school and got an MBA, and things got worse. I started trying drugs, started snorting cocaine, smoking weed. I was drinking excessively, as you can imagine, as I kind of already explained. I was gambling a lot. And I ended up, after business school, moving to New York City. I got a job during the housing crisis, somehow got a job on Wall Street as an investment banker. I got lucky. I think they picked me because of all of the traits that I'm about to describe to you. I was, I don't know how to say this. When I got to New York, all of my addictions went to 10x. I started drinking all the time. I started doing drugs at work. It was condoned. It was how I stayed awake. I was working 110-hour weeks, and I used drugs at work. I used work and being tired as an excuse to use. And then when I'd been using and working hard and I needed to sleep, I used alcohol as an excuse to wind down. And I got into this 7-year cycle of just drinking and drugging nonstop. And I use it as, it sounds like an excuse, but I was working in an environment where it was not frowned upon. Like, it was not encouraged. It's not like JP Morgan gave me the cocaine, but it's not like they didn't know that the guy that cleaned the bathrooms every night on our floor sold it either. Like, that they knew. And during that time, I was going to Atlantic City a lot and partying and gambling, and I was getting in trouble. I was starting to gamble too much again, losing a lot of money. Cashed out a 401k to fund my addictions. Cashed out another investment vehicle to fund my addictions, and I was getting close to bankruptcy at this point, probably 2011, 12. At this point in my life, I added another addiction to my mix. I started, engaging in, acting out sexually with sex workers, and it got to the point where that plus gambling, drinking, and drugs was my life. I didn't have another life, and I 2012 decided that I couldn't live like that anymore. I never crossed my mind at that point that I didn't, like, that I had a problem, that like I was an addict. It crossed my mind that I thought, I live in New York and I'm an investment banker and this is what these people do. And so if I move back to Texas, good old wholesome Texas where I'm from, I'm going to be good. Like, I'm going to wake up in a suburb and, go to church on Sundays, and there's gonna be no more drugs, alcohol, girls, like everything's gonna be back to normal. So I moved back to Dallas in like July-ish of 2012, June, July, August 2012. And about a week into being here, I had joined a country club, and the first people I met there were the Coke dealer and the bookie. And I was just, within a week of being here in Texas, I was back to everything the same. And I ended up taking another investment banking job solely because it was soul sucking. I hate it. It's the worst job ever. It's so harmful for you. But I took an investment banking job because I needed that income to fund my addictions. And so I did that for another 3 or 4 years. And after that, I started a venture capital firm. And I raised some money. I went out, started investing in startups. And I was very autonomous at this point. And this is when things really got bad for me. I had no oversight. I had no boss. I had just free reign over my life, and I was traveling a lot, setting my own schedule. And I was building a part of my business in Southern California. And what ended up happening was I started going to Vegas about 25 or 30 times a year. And it was absolutely crazy. And I hate using that word because I'm type 1 bipolar, but I don't know another way to describe it. My life got, if you think it was out of control in New York, it got really out of control. And I was living like a second life on the West Coast. When I went to the West Coast, I'd stay there for a week or two at a time. I would lie to people and tell them I wasn't married. I'd do all kinds of crazy shit. I don't know if you've seen the TV show Mad Men, but I literally fancied myself Don Draper. Like, I no shit, woke up one day and was like, I have a second fucking life, and I didn't plan this, but I don't know how to manage it. It's out of control. Like, the shame and the guilt from all of that drove me further into my addiction. So at this point in my life, this like really interesting moment started to happen, where this feeling where I really wanted to not do these things for the first time. I really hated what I was doing to myself and my life and the people that cared about me, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't handle the shame and the guilt. So I kept drinking, I kept using, I kept spending time with these people that just didn't give a shit about me. And it continued to wreck my life. And then in August of 2018, I was home. I was in Dallas, and I went to a concert, drank a couple bottles of champagne before I went, and got there, drank a bunch more, got into an argument with my wife, and I left. And the way I had programmed myself was I just go to the strip club and blow off some steam, and I'll come home at 3 or 4 in the morning and go to bed. So I go, and I'd lost a ton of money the months before that with my addictions and with gambling, and go to the strip club, get drunk, do drugs, and my credit card gets declined. I'd never had that happen before. And so at that moment, I realized the fucking show was over. Like, the credit line was over, the money was gone, I was toast. And so I go home. I'm in a very elevated state. I go home. I wrecked my house. Like, if you were to see pictures, you would probably not have dialed in. Like, I did like $25,000 worth of drywall damage to my house, just destroying shit. And I mean, it was really bad. And in that process, I knocked some giant thing, I'll paint shadow box painting off the wall above the bed, fell on my wife, cut her. She's bleeding. Like, the house is torn up. And all of a sudden, like, I come to and I'm like, holy shit, like, you need help. I'm not going to the emergency room. So you just, like, go down the street to my sister's house and get her to take you. So she goes to the emergency room. And so at that point, this is an addict. Okay. So at that point, I think, fuck it, I'll just get in the car and drive to Vegas, because, like, this is as good a time as any. And it's probably like a 16-hour drive, and I'm drunk. So I get in the car. It's 4 in the morning. I start driving to Las Vegas from Dallas, which is, I'm not going to make it. I have no chance to make it. So I get a couple hours down the road. I get tired, and my wife's been calling. I answer. I told her what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to Vegas. Like, the house is fucked up. Hotels here suck. I'm going to the Wynn. I'll be back. And so I pulled over in this roadside motel. I sleep for a few hours. I get back in my car, and as I pull out of the hotel parking lot, I was, like, destroyed by the entire state of Texas. Like, every armed service, I don't know what the hell these people were, SWAT, state troopers, cops, I don't know. Everybody was there. So I obviously get pulled over. I get arrested. I get thrown in jail. And they say, do you know why you're here? And I was like, actually, I have no fucking clue. And I'd been charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So my wife had told the police that I had attacked her with a hammer, and because that's just what she told them. And so they, at that point, decided that that was a good enough reason to track me down and arrest me, which damn well certain it was. And so my wife simultaneously has sobered up and gone back to the police and said, hey, listen, I told you that story to just get you to go get him and stop him. That's not what happened. Like, let me walk you through the house and show you what happened. And she did, and they listened. And she said, this is what happened. Like, we actually didn't get in a fight. Like, it's fine. And this detective was like, I don't really care. And so they arrested me. They charged me with this crime. And my about 48 hours after that, I had invested in this esports business with Mark Cuban, and it had gotten covered. And so this esports writer finds out about this. My brother actually called the press and told them this had happened. So my brother calls the press, tells them what happened. And 2 days later, Dallas Morning News, ESPN, TechCrunch, VentureBeat, all of them, all the tech media had written articles that venture capitalist, attacks wife with hammer. And so, as you can imagine, my life completely unraveled at that point. And, it was, I was pissed and bitter, because I was like, I didn't do that. Now, I'd done some awful shit, but I didn't do that. And so I'm bitter, I'm resentful, and I get to a new low. And at this moment, I think I've got nothing to live for. I've lost my business. So my partner fired me from the venture fund. I lost everything there. I was basically headed for bankruptcy because of the gambling. And, I've been destroyed in the press. I could never get a job. Like, it was just, my world ended. And so I did what I know to do. My neural pathways are programmed to do certain things when I feel that way. And so I lied to everybody and hopped on a plane and went to Las Vegas. And I partied for 3 or 4 days. And then I tried to take my own life. and I tried to overdose. That takes a lot for me, as it didn't work. And then the next night, I intended to jump off the top of the Cosmo, because they have balconies. So I never stay there, but that trip I was staying at the Wynn, but I booked a hotel room at the Cosmo just because they have balconies. So it was my exit plan. I knew I was going to do it. And, went out, got fucked up, intended to take my life, got too fucked up, blacked out. And when I woke up the next morning, my wife and my dad, who didn't know where I was, were in my hotel room at about next morning, meaning like 2:00 in the afternoon on Monday in the middle of August in Las Vegas. It's just not a pleasant time to be there. And they were like, look, do you want to live? And I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, the fact that they were there made me say yes, because I thought, okay, well, somebody gives a shit. And I made my way to rehab. I actually went home to Texas, and I went in front of a therapist. I'd been to therapists before. I had lied to them. Every time a therapist had gotten close to figuring me out and shutting me down, I would just start telling them bullshit stories. I'd lie. I'd catch her in the rye holding Caulfield them. I would just make shit up. The sky's blue. No, it's not. It's pink, because I say it is. And I went to a therapist, and one of my co-investors had recommended somebody that treated some of their players for their team. And I went to see this lady, and I told her the truth. I took my wife, and I said, listen, you have to help me. If we never speak again, you have to help me tell the truth, because I just don't think I can do it. And so we sit down, 2 hours of unloading the truth. And this therapist called me a few days later and was like, look, you got to go to an inpatient center. You got to go to treatment. And so I agreed, and I went to rehab. And so I'm the guy that shows up to rehab, and I didn't think I had a problem. It still hasn't crossed my mind that I have an addiction at this point. Like, I was thinking maybe I was bipolar, because like I'd been told that I was, and kind of had the signs. I just thought I was crazy and that I needed like medication. So I go to rehab. I sit down the first night, and they forced me to go to an AA meeting. And I sit down in the room, and the last time I had heard the word God was in high school, when I was forced to go to church with my family growing up in Southern Baptist, gun-toting, Republican land where I live now. And nothing wrong with those folks, but that's where I grew up, and I was immersed in it. And so I'm sitting in this room, and I'm looking, there's 12 steps up on the wall, and we're going to have an AA meeting. And I just done in processing, and I'm like, I don't want to be there. I only think I'm there to get away from like the cops and the district attorney and the press and all the bullshit. And so I sit down in this room, and 16 people spoke before me. We went in a big circle. Everybody's sharing their stories about the shit they did. They're saying like, hey, I'm Billy Joe Bob, and I'm an alcoholic, and my story, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that guy didn't do shit. And then this lady would go, and this lady would say, hey, I'm Jane so-and-so, and I did this. And I'm like, it's DUI. Shit, I drove drunk every day. And like, getting a DUI is no big deal. It's not like, that's an alcoholic. After 16 of these stories, because I'm prepared to go, I'm Steven, I'm an alcoholic, I guess. Maybe I'm not, I don't know, but like, I don't belong here. I have 44 more days until I'm out of here. And I heard these stories, and something happened before I opened my mouth. And I'd heard enough people describe what my life was like and call themselves an alcoholic. And dude, I couldn't get a fucking word out of my mouth. I froze. I started crying, and I just broke down. And I was like, fuck, I'm an alcoholic. Holy shit. And I just said, I don't know what to tell you people. I had no idea until I heard you tell me what was wrong with you. That like, I just figured it out. Holy shit. And from then I finally said, okay, I need to try something. So I worked hard during rehab, did a lot of work, processed a lot of childhood trauma that I think led to a lot of the things that I experienced later in life, with trauma from stuff with my parents. And I started to get it. So I get out of rehab. All right. I go home. I've got 45 days of sobriety. I get off the plane. First thing I do is go to an AA meeting. Good for me. Showed up to a speaker meeting, doing the right things. Found a sponsor, went to his house the next morning. And this guy was saying shit that like at rehab, when you're really fucked up, you get a prize. People like pat you on the back for being the most fucked up kid at rehab. All right. So it's like, if you're just like kind of there, or you only have this one thing, or your story's not that nuts, you're in one camp of people and they all hang out together. But if you were really jacked up, then those kids all hang out together. I guess it's like prison in a way, probably, like so like I was hanging out with the really fucked up people and getting patted on the back all the time that, hey, good for you for being here. I get out to real AA. I show up to a real sponsor, a guy who went through some shit to get sober, and he sits me down and starts kicking my ass. And I'm like, fuck this. Like, I thought I was just going to text you every day and tell you, like, I'm not drinking, and like, I'm going to show up to fucking meetings and sit in the back and tweet and hang out and sign my sheet so that the DA gets off my ass. And when I'm done, I'm out of here. I don't need my ass kicked like this. And so I never went back. I went home and the pink cloud lifted and I was not feeling good anymore. I was back in the real world. I had all my problems and I had no coping mechanisms. And so I went to bed, and I no shit, did not leave my house for 90 days. About 90 days. I played video games from midnight to 7, 8 in the morning, and I slept till midnight. I remember wanting to go to an AA meeting. I looked around and I found a 10 p.m. meeting. And I remember, like, for weeks, this sounds nuts, for weeks, I couldn't get out of bed in time to make the fucking 10 p.m. Like, that's how fucked my life was sober. Like, I couldn't get to a daytime meeting. I couldn't contend it. No job, no excuse, just emotionally couldn't fucking do it. And so this guy calls me up one day. I did leave the house every once in a while to go to therapy. This guy catches me in the car. He says, hey, meet me for coffee. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, the only people that want to meet me want to kill me. I owe them money, or like they don't realize that I don't have any money. And so this guy's like, come meet me. I meet him for coffee. I show up at this restaurant, at this coffee shop. And this guy sits down, older guy, and he says, Steve, I want to help you. And I was like, yeah, that fucking chance. And he tells me his story. His story's bonkers. Like, those of you that are in recovery, you'll understand this. Like, there's this thing that kind of happens in the recovery community when two people whose story is kind of equivalent, like they've been through the equivalent level of shit, find each other in recovery land. There's this, I see you, I got you, we're on the same. Okay, cool. That was this guy for me. And so he told me all of his stories. They were nuts. He went to get felony, he got a felony for stealing money and spending on gambling from his investors. Like, this guy, nuts. He has a steakhouse called Bob's Steak and Chop House. It's all over the country. They've got him in every Omni hotel now. They're in almost every city. His name's Bob. And he's like, I'm Bob. And I used to have this steakhouse and I lost it. And I was like, no shit, you're the steak guy. And he commiserated with me. At the end of this coffee, he's like, I need you to come to this Bible study with me. And I have not gotten there. Okay. I've done step 1 and I have refused to do step 2 in AA because I am not going to have a conversation about God. I'm just not going to do it. He says, come to a Bible study. And I was like, oh my God, dude, like, I'm not doing that. Like, he's like, listen, it's a dozen guys. They're all really fucked up. You're going to fit in just fine. And I was like, okay, that sounds all right. Actually, fucked up guys. Okay. I'll go check it out. So I go to this Bible study. I walk in and they're playing this video that day. And this video just hit me. It hit me in a certain way. And I was like, I grew up hearing that. That sounds familiar. It softened me in a way where I was able to consider a higher power. I was able to consider that there might be something out there that my ego might not be the biggest thing in the universe, that there might be something bigger than me. And I showed up to church and I went back to the Bible study, and then that softened me up and I walked into AA. I got a sponsor, and the funniest thing happened. I walked into AA and one of my buddies that I got just fucked up with and went to Vegas with all the time from that country club that I joined, that I got kicked out of later. Very hard to get kicked out of a country club for being an alcoholic because they make all their money on selling alcohol. Okay. Very hard to do. I did it, but it had to do with the drugs. So my former golf partner was in that room, and I walked in and I was like, holy shit. He walks up to me after the meeting and I'm so nervous. And he says, Steve, I figured I'd see you here or at your funeral. I didn't know which one. And I was just like, damn, dude, that's pretty fucking heavy. Like, other people knew it. You knew that I had a problem. And he's like, you're the only one that didn't fucking know. And he said, I want to introduce you to my sponsor. I met this guy's sponsor, and this guy took me under his wing and started walking me through the program, the AA program. And I'm telling you, that guy asking me to coffee, my wife coming to that hotel room, that guy asking me to coffee, and me running into that guy in an AA meeting that I walked into intending to walk out and never come back because I just was going to try it one more time. All three of those things had to happen to save my life. No fucking doubt about it. And I started working a program, and it turned my, I mean, dude, it changed everything. I started sleeping normal hours. Like, basic, simple things started to be big wins for me. I started like sleeping at night and being awake during the day. And, you know, I started wanting to go to church, and I started wanting to maybe find a way to earn some money because I was mooching off my parents to pay my bills. And, you know, my wife's parents were getting pretty tired of that. And so I eventually didn't know how I was going to go get a job. And so because I didn't know how to tell my fucking story. I didn't know how I was going to tell people the shit that I had done and then overcome what was written about me on the internet. And so I decided to write a blog post. I wrote a blog post about what had happened. I just told the whole story, and I put it on LinkedIn. So I thought people might see it there. And dude, I'm telling you, all day, every day for weeks, nonstop inbound messages from people being like, dude, I'm going to share my story now. Or, man, you know what? I'm going to ask for help now. Just every day somebody emailed saying that. And I was like, holy shit, this is cool. Kind of like this. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to tell my story, and I'm going to help other people tell their story. So I started a podcast. And the podcast was literally me just getting on and telling my story for 10 minutes. If you believe it or not, I can do it in 10 minutes. And then I had somebody else come on and tell theirs. And then it just started growing. And I said, well, maybe I could go find, does anybody else have this problem? Like, is anybody trying to solve it? Is anybody trying to invest in it? And then I went out and said, maybe I could raise a new venture fund. Maybe I could go invest in startups doing mental health stuff. And so I went out and spent a few months trying to invest and raise money. I tried to raise money to build a venture fund. And it turns out it's really hard to do when you've got some shit hanging over your head. And when you've been sober for 4 months, and yeah, people don't trust you because you're asking them to give you $20 million for 10 years. And you've been sober for 4 months, and the last time they saw you, you were trying to jump off a fucking high rise, and you got blown up by the media for it. It's dicey to ask people for money in that situation. And so this one investor came to me and said, look, start a syndicate, make it no commitment. Don't take people's money. Go find the founders, help them raise money, funnel the money into their business, and do it for free. And so I did. I started doing that. And we started pulling capital together to invest in these startups, started helping them grow. Investors started learning about it, and then they started asking to put money in, and then it grew, and then it grew. And then literally just in 18 months time, it went from people telling me to pound sand to I have 315 people that are an investor in my thing, my fund. And they every time I want to back a founder that's building a mental health startup, they send money, and we put millions into these companies and we help build them. And dude, it's the most fucking rewarding and fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. I get to like live my recovery in my job. It's fucking amazing. And the podcast, it's fun. I love it. I get to tell people stories. I get to help people. I had a guy on a couple weeks ago who he has a startup that's like a men's small group startup, and he helps guys get well. And it's focused on men's mental health. And we published his episode. And at the next day, he emails me and said, hey, a bunch of guys joined my virtual group last night, and 2 of them made a commitment to stop drinking and get help and get well. And they found out about it from the fucking podcast. And I was like, holy shit, like, this is amazing. Like, we get to help people. And, you know, then a couple weeks later, I had a guy on. I had Robin Williams' son, Zach, is an investor in my thing, and just the nicest, sweetest guy. And he came on the podcast and talked about his dad killing himself and about how it impacted him, and how his addiction went to all-time high after that, and it led to a divorce, and he almost took his own life, and he got sober, and he started serving. And he explained to me this concept that I'd never really been able to articulate until I experienced what helping other people felt like. He said when he started being vulnerable and serving people, he got well. He said he started being an advocate. He said he started going to San Quentin prison and teaching inmates how to do personal finance, so when they got out, they'd be able to manage their budgets. He started being an advocate for mental health groups. He started sponsoring people in AA that have a hard time finding a sponsor, like kids of other actors and stuff. And he said, like, getting involved and being vulnerable and serving people is how he got well. And it's like the coolest thing in the world. It's whether you're doing AA, whether you're doing 12 steps or whether or not, it's the most cleansing and healing thing I could ever just like describe. I mean, when you help other people, you get the two things that I think are the most important in recovery. You get community, you get connectivity. So Johan Hari talks about this, that isolation, that actually the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's isolation, it's connectivity. So he says that connectivity is the solution for everything. If we get the right connectivity in our lives, we'll be well. And then he actually kind of talks about the whole Rat Park study that they had done. You should listen to his interview on Joe Rogan. It's 3 hours long and it's worth it. And then, I don't know, it just like life totally changed for me when I started trying to do something to help other people. And I still need to figure out how to like generate income from it. So I'll eventually do that. But life's totally different now. I've been sober for just over 20 months. From all addictions, from acting out sexually to gambling, drugs, alcohol. I get to help other guys and help them get well. And I get to talk about recovery, and I get to talk about mental health all day, every day. And I need it. Like, I need to be doing the job that I'm doing to stay well. Like, it's just something I need. And I feel like I probably rambled. My story is crazy, and I probably missed some important things. But I think the best part of a conversation like this is kind of Q&A. So I really want to leave the bulk of the time here for that. So I'm sure I missed some important stuff, but those were the highlights.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Wow. Yeah, your story is quite amazing. It's hard for me to picture. I know the Cosmo, like I've been there, right? I'm thinking about the balcony and wow, that is really incredible that you were able to pull yourself out of that dark place. And I mean, I know it's not easy, right? It's not instant. Like, we don't just get well overnight. So I'm really happy that you did talk about early recovery, because I think early recovery can be one of the hardest parts, because then we're out of the bubble and then we actually have to get to work.
Yeah.
So a question that I have, when you think about your past and how you were, like, do you think about that a lot? Or like, what kind of, do you have compassion for yourself when you look back?
More now than I did. I still have shame and guilt. I've processed a lot of it. Processing shame and guilt is something that led me to addiction, like not being able to do it. So it's a new thing for me. I'll be 40 in a month, and spent 38 years not knowing how to do it. So I do sometimes, but it's a new thing for me. I still beat myself up sometimes, but I can stop. But I learned something in rehab. So I thought meditation and affirmations were the stupidest thing in the world. Like, I just thought, this is stupid shit, like Saturday Night Live's, whatever, Stuart Smalley type stuff. Like, you're good enough, you're like whatever. I thought, so dumb. And my small group leader, there was a guy in my small group in rehab. He was the drummer for a 90s rock band that I loved. So it was fucking weird walking in there the first day being like, wait, I know you. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he told me, he's like, dude, you got to do the affirmations. You got to do 100 affirmations a day. You stand in front of the fucking mirror and say nice things to yourself. And I was like, Scott, there's no fucking way. Like, that's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard of in my life. I said, I remember telling him, I was like, okay, how about this? I'll come by your room and you do it. You stand in front of your mirror and say 100 fucking things to yourself. If you do it, then I'll do it. And he did it. And I was like, it reminded me of the scene out of the Motley Crue movie where the guy snorts a line of ants off the pool deck. I was like, okay, I guess I have to do it now. And I did. And it felt fucking great. And then shortly after that, I went into this laboratory room and they hooked my brain up to this machine and it showed prefrontal cortex frequencies, alpha, theta, delta, gamma waves. That's what, for the most part, they measure to prove the state that you're in. So like if those frequencies are elevated high enough, you're in fight or flight. And just sitting there after breakfast on a Monday morning, I was in fight or flight by the science of it, by the machine told me. And I felt fine, but what fine looked like for me had been so normalized to not fine that being in that state just felt like regular old Sunday morning to me. And they said, watch this. And they said, take a deep breath. And I was like, okay. So I took a deep breath, let it out, did it again. 1 minute later, after taking deep breaths, everything had normalized. Like my prefrontal cortex frequencies told me that I was in like a normal resting state. And they were like, what do you think about meditation? And I said, it's fucking stupid. And they were like, well, you just did it. And look what it did to you. And just things like that changed my life, getting to see that science. Because I would have never believed that saying nice things to yourself or doing meditation, I mean, I would have never done that. And being able to see the science changed my life. And that's helped me be kinder to myself and take care of myself. But dude, sometimes, man, today I had a noon call with an investor to invest in my thing. And it was my second call with him. He picks up the phone and he yells at me. I mean, like yells at me. And he's like, what the fuck? He's like, you didn't tell me about all the shit you did. He's like, you pitched me, I want to invest in your thing. But he goes, you didn't fucking tell me about all the stuff you did. And I was just kind of like, yeah. I said, listen, man. I said, you know, one of the things I do to take care of myself, I said, I don't talk about that shit. So if that's what you want to talk about, then we're not going to work together. I don't want your money. But I said, listen, man, if it's true and I did it, I will tell you that I did it and I will own it. If it is untrue and it's some gossip bullshit on the internet, I don't owe a response to that. And that's me taking care of myself. And that's more important than anything else. I could have never fucking done that a year and a half ago, even in sobriety. So anyway, I hope that kind of answers the question. And yes, what you said, early recovery, holy shit. I mean, it is hard. I remember thinking to myself, you know who I first was able to talk to about this was Sherry Garcia, who I think you know, the Cornbread Hustle. She does second chance hiring for people getting out of prison. And we talked about this a lot. And she talked about this on my podcast. Like in early recovery, like I was just kind of like, I guess I'll do this. This sucks. I have to do it. And then the worst days, the day before a milestone were the worst. Holy shit, I remember almost drinking on day 364. Oh, like I can feel it right now. That was the worst day in recovery for me. It was the day before 1 year. It's hard, man. It's really fucking hard. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But it's worth it. Like it's the benefit of doing it. It's the best thing you'll ever do for yourself. Like it will change your life if you can actually overcome this shit and get plugged into the recovery community. There's a life out there that I didn't know existed. Like I was driving down the highway the day before I was going to go to rehab, and I was miserable. I was sober for a few days at that point. I was miserable. And the thought in my mind was, how in the fuck am I going to have a life worth living if I can't do all those things? Like, what am I going to do for fun? Like, fun for me was drugs and hookers and drinking and gambling. Anything short of that was just a waste of time until I got to do those things again. So like, what was I going to do? Sit at home and fucking put puzzles together on the weekend? Just like, early recovery was so hard. I thought I'd lost all the things that were of value to me, and I learned otherwise later. But again, I ramble, so I'm sorry that was a long answer.
No, that's great. And so what would you say to someone now who's like a week out of rehab and says, I don't know how to have sober fun? Like, what would you tell them?
Me, tell them I'm a hardcore AAist. I would tell them, look, if it doesn't hurt enough, it's like, if you don't want to be sober, then, I mean, I can't make you. But if you want to change your life, like if you want to not have to worry about the shit that you used to have to worry about, if you want to not have to lie to yourself and other people, we'll get you well. There's this very simple process, and you just have to work on some shit. And it's hard. Yeah, it's really fucking hard. And I think what I would say is, if they're willing to listen, you can't say this to everyone because some people won't buy into the intellectual explanation. But for me, I would say, listen, your brain has been trained that when you don't feel good, you go do this thing. And you don't feel good. And you've deprived yourself of the thing. That pathway between pain and the solution is so ingrained. It's like a fucking 8-lane highway. And right now I'm asking you to take a dirt road, and you need to get there quickly. And the dirt road's slow and the highway's fast, and you really want to get on that highway. But dude, if you'll just take the dirt road long enough, the dirt road will start to pave it. It'll get smoother because you keep driving over it. And the highway, grass will grow in it, and then trees will grow in it. And then you can't drive down it anymore. You could find it. It's still, that pathway will always be there. It'll never go away. That interstate will never go away. It'll be underground one day, buried by trees and grass and shit. But that neural pathway has to get repaved, and it's manual labor. Like, you have to suck it up. It does suck. And the way you do it is, every time you don't think you can make it, you pick up a fucking list of phone numbers and start calling people who are sober and tell them you can't stay sober. And you keep doing that until you find someone who answers the phone, and talk to them until the craving goes away, and it will. That's what I would tell people. That's what I do tell people. Some people do it, some people don't.
I love that visual. That is hugely powerful. I'm gonna borrow that from you, because I think, yeah, it is, to someone who doesn't understand recovery, like, it's always going to be there. You know, we hear about, oh, your addiction's in the parking lot doing push-ups, right? That's a very common term. But I love the highway analogy. So I do have a question here. How did you rebuild your self-confidence to a level to not crumble when that investor was yelling at you?
It's not there. My self-confidence is not there. It's not, self-confidence is not the answer to that equation. It's boundaries. One of the things I learned in early recovery was how to build a boundary system. So I learned how to not let other people I have a boundary that keeps their, I don't know how to say this, I'm not a therapist, like, keeps their vibe out. So if that guy's going off on me, that's not me. He's not reacting to me. And he's certainly not reacting to me now. He's reacting to something he read about me that isn't true. He's reacting to something I did in the past. He's reacting to the way I used to be. And you know what? Fuck that guy. Me, old me, not the investor. Fuck old me. I hate old me too. So he's screaming at me, and that's what's going through my mind. I'm like, dude, I'd react this way too. Like, I totally fucking get it. Because I can't allow myself to feel resentment towards that guy. Because resentment, anger, that's the source of my need for dopamine and to go down that neuro pathway. And if the resentment and the anger level builds up enough, I will have no choice. I will drink again. I will act out again. And so I can't allow myself to process what he's saying in a way that allows me to feel resentment. So it's not my confidence. My confidence is marginal sometimes. It's my boundary system. That guy's opinion of me is not going to impact me. And it's certainly not going to make me feel resentment, because that's going to make me drink. So that's how I handle it. But that took me, if you had asked me that question 3 or 4 months ago, 18 months into sobriety, I couldn't have explained that to you. That's a new thing I've realized.
How cool. So yeah, over time, and we learn more and more things. It's like that snowball effect. We learn domino, one tilts over, hits 5 other dominoes, and I think, yeah, it's just quite amazing. You have such a good delivery, Stephen. Like I really appreciate this call. Something that has been on my mind is to ask you about the healing relationship with your family, if you're comfortable talking about that, because
yeah, happy to.
this comes up a lot for people that are either coming out of rehab or deciding to enter recovery. Yeah, so I'd love to hear what's happened for you in that arena.
So I'll start with my wife. So my wife also is in the program. She's 14 months sober, coming up here in 2 weeks. So I had to look at the calendar to get it right. So my wife, when I came back from rehab, when I went, gave her, I just like gave her my phone and my laptop and all my passwords. And I just said, I don't even know what I'm supposed to tell you. So here's all the shit. And, when she showed up to family week, 5 weeks into rehab, she had access to every email I'd ever sent to a hooker, every girl I'd ever talked to. She had access to every text message. She had access to, she should have fucking killed me. And, we sat down during that week together at rehab when she showed up, and the conversation was kind of like, look, it was fucked up, but she was like, look, I was in the same place. Like I was, doing my own things, and I was, drinking, and I'm not going to air her story here, but the conversation quickly went to like, I don't want to ever feel that way. Like I want to be well. I want you to be well. If we can be well together, let's be well together. And if we can't, let's be well apart, but let's figure out how to be well. And that journey to wellness actually brought us closer together than we'd ever been. It was like I was in a relationship with a whole new person. Same for her. But it was weird though. Like we were really good right after rehab. We were really good there for a minute. Things got worse between us after that, especially during like the days when I didn't leave the house for 3 months. And then something happened probably 5 months after rehab, when I started going to that Bible study and I started getting engaged and going to AA and working a program and going to Sex Addicts Anonymous and I was going to like 5 12-step groups, dude. Like I was putting 50 hours a week into recovery. It was a full-time fucking job. She got worse. She started drinking all day, every day. And this weird thing happened. She got resentful of the reactions people were giving me. She got resentful of people telling me, good for you, man, like cheerleading me. And so her resentment drove her further into her addiction that she had never actually dealt with. And then after some gnarly shit happened with her and her drinking, she got to the point where she was willing to quit. And she went to the program, AA. She got a sponsor. She started working the steps, started getting well, and our relationship started getting a lot better. She hated AA. She quit about 2 months into it, and she engaged in a recovery program at my church and fell in love with it and completed the program and has been sober for over a year. And, for her, look, she's a beautiful, Baylor sorority girl, blonde Texas girl, like you would imagine. And, their AA is full of fucking creepy old white guys, to be honest. And she was really fucking uncomfortable in AA. And so she found her own program that worked for her. I'm really glad, because I think that the men in my AA group are fucking filthy. And a lot of them haven't dealt with anything other than their alcohol. They still have issues they need to deal with. And when I bring up sex addiction in front of them, they get really fucking uncomfortable. And I know that that's because they're still holding on to their the shit they're doing that I used to do. And so my wife and I had this really interesting path that it got better, it got worse, then it got, I mean, it's the best it's ever been right now. Like it's fucking incredible. Like it feels like when we were dating, honestly. And it's great. My rest of my family, my brother and I still don't speak. He when I got in trouble with the law, he went out of his way to go to the district attorney and give him everything he knew. He actually offered to be my attorney. I took him up on it. He got me to tell him everything that happened, and he actually took all that and gave it to the district attorney to try to crush me. He is the one who he called the press and told them about what I'd been through to get them to write about it. And I still have fucking resentment. I'm not willing to speak to him. That is an amend that I have not made, and I don't know if I will. My sponsor beats me up for that, but fuck him. Just don't feel like doing that one. The guy's an asshole. My sister was never anything but loving to me, and it took me a year to speak to her after rehab, out of my own shame and guilt. She wanted nothing more than just to say congratulations and be nice to me, and I didn't want to speak to her. Just shame and guilt. I couldn't fucking handle it. And my dad and my relationship got pretty good. But the thing is, like, I started processing a lot of shit that was done to me as a kid, dealing with it in a way. And I just couldn't be honest with him about that, about how some things impacted me. And we have a relationship. I mean, we get together and have dinner once a week. It's good, but it's still, there's still some stuff there. So the family relationships were hard. Outside of family, I want to say this about recovery. When I meet new people, for the most part, minus the investor today who fucking ape shit on me, most people are like, wow, good for you, man. They just want to high five and pat you on the back for turning your life around, which is great. Or they just ghost you and never speak to you again, and you don't know why, but you know why. Tell you what, my biggest relationship issues are with people that knew me and did business with me before I got well. Those people, 10% of the ones I reached out to make amends responded. Very few of them will react to me. I'm investing in startups, but startups from my hometown here in Dallas won't speak to me. My lawyer that I'd hired in the past won't work for me. Like, I'd asked him to do work for me. He like fired me as a client, won't work for me. I've been, just like, there's still a lot of like social pain that I have to deal with past relationships. And it's a fight for me to get treated that way and not feel resentment towards those people, because that's all I can control. Like, if they don't want to speak to me, they don't want to work with me, they don't want to be associated with me, I have to spend most of my recovery time these days working on not allowing that to make me resentful. Because if it does, I'm going to the fucking strip club and I'm getting fucked up and I'm going to Vegas. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think I'll survive a relapse. I just don't think it was bad. It was fucking bad. And, I didn't mention this in my story. I forgot. When I was in rehab, I got diagnosed with type 1 bipolar disorder. And, I have to do a lot of work to manage that shit. I take medication for it. I eat a certain diet for it. Turns out like the ketogenic diet can help you like mute mood swings. It's like proven. Like, they've been using it for 100 years to treat epilepsy. I didn't know that. I had a guy on my podcast a couple months ago to explain that to me because I couldn't fucking understand it. So I needed to have him on my podcast as an excuse to ask him really basic fucking questions because I was embarrassed to ask them myself. And so, yeah, dude, relationships from the past are really, really hard to bridge and to mend, and some of them will never be fixed. But I was bitching about this to my therapist the other day, and he reminded me, to read. There's a story in the back of the AA book. If you're not in AA, if you're working on their program, just Google this. There's a story called Grounded. It's about some pilots. It's about a pilot who turned his life upside down, and then it took him decades, but he eventually really kind of rebuilt all those relationships. It's a powerful fucking story. Just Google it. If you're not in AA and don't have a book, go just Google the story Grounded. It's incredible. I feel like I'm on that journey, and he had to remind me of that.
I love that you brought this up with the social circles from before, social circle now. I mean, I'm sure with your podcast, like even how we met, right? You're meeting lots of different people in the industry. Does that just charge you up to keep going?
Sometimes it's really draining. Mm-hmm. Because it just, I don't know. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. You know, sometimes people shit all over you. Sometimes people want to take advantage of you. Sometimes people want to just, and I want to help people, but sometimes I can't carve out enough time. Like people want to unload on you. They want to like, you know, do therapy with you. And it's like, listen, I'm not a therapist. Okay. Thank you for telling me your story. I'll tell you mine. Sounds like we have something in common here. And I have the way I know how I got sober. And I can help someone walk through that path. So if you want to get well, great. Story time's over. I have the way that my sponsor helped me, and that's how I'm going to help people. And if that doesn't work for you, then hey, look, my wife did it at church. And you know, I have friends who've done it with sober coaches, and I've had friends who've done it with other means. There's 1,000 ways to get sober. There's no right way. Sobriety is not a carbon copy. Like my sobriety might not look like yours. You know, I might be able to gamble and smoke weed, but not drink. You might not be able to do anything. I know I can't. I can't do any drugs. I don't trust myself. I can't gamble. I can't do all the gnarly shit I used to do. Some people don't have issues with that. One of my buddies had a gambling addiction. He still drinks, doesn't gamble. Good for him. So all that to say, recovery is different for every single person. And the reason I said that is because my style of recovery worked for me. And when I meet people like me, my style might work for them. And so I walk them through my style. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I can't let it drain me. I spend my time helping people who seem to respond to my way of doing it.
I love that. Yeah, we talked about this before. Recovery looks different for everyone. There's no pill out there. There's no magical unicorn therapist out there. There's no magical treatment center. Otherwise, the treatment center would say we've got a 100% success rate. We know that's not to be true, right?
Oh, that's dog shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. So thank you. And I am getting some good questions here. So I have one from Stephanie. She says, Stephen, I'm in early recovery, straight out of rehab a week ago.
Good for you. Right on.
Yeah. My question is, how do you build those good habits right out of the gate? Like, for example, regular sleep, getting to meetings on time, just taking care of yourself. Like she said, she's also struggled with suicidal ideation.
Yeah. So about suicidal ideation, like one of the things I need to do more on the podcast is tell that story. I have to be careful because I get in trouble because I'm not a therapist and I say this wrong, but like, it's fucking normal. Like people think about it. I mean, I do. Other people do. Zach did. His dad did. You know, so like, don't beat yourself up over those thoughts. Just know that when you have those thoughts, you need to reach out to somebody. Like try to discipline yourself enough to pick up the telephone when you have that thought and just tell one person. Go down the phone list from your group or wherever you've got and call until someone answers and just say, listen, man, I'm fucking struggling and I'm probably going to drink and I'm thinking about having suicidal thoughts. Say those words out loud. I'm telling you, just saying that out loud to another human being, if you could just make yourself just do that when that's going on, it will radically change your experience. And, you know, making meetings on time, dude, don't beat yourself fucking up. at all. Miss a meeting, don't go late. Go show up for the last 12 minutes. Stand outside, don't go inside. Talk to 2 or 3 people who walk out and say, I shouldn't feel like going inside tonight. Like, just when you feel the shit that made you do the thing you don't want to do, just do anything other than the thing you used to do for now. And the easiest thing to do, in my mind, for me, was just to pick up the phone and call someone and say, man, I feel like shit. And it worked. It worked. I laid in bed for 3 months before I started doing it that way. But then when I started doing that and I started showing up to that Bible study, when I started showing up to stuff, I got a little bit better. I got a little bit better. And you're 1 week out of rehab, like, good for you. Fuck yeah. And you know what? I'm not saying that relapsing is okay, but my book says that it's progress, not perfection. So like, if something fucks up in your life and something goes sideways, call your sponsor, call someone, tell them, talk about it. Because if you do that, you won't go as far. Go get help the next day, and you'll get better. Like, I don't know, man. People have this misconception. Like, they feel like you go into AA or a program and then you come out of rehab and you're well. Dude, there are days that I drive down the highway and I fucking crave a night in Vegas. I mean, just like I did it yesterday and I have to do it again today. And it's been 20 months for me. Like, it's fucking hard, man. It's really hard. And if you want to be well, you will be, but it's hard. And it's okay to feel like it fucking sucks, because it kicked my ass for the longest. It still kicks my ass sometimes. So get plugged into the recovery community, get a solid group of women in recovery. If you're going to AA, get involved in a group of women, and just surround yourself with people who have some sober time, and reach out to them. And it sounds clear. I hate saying this because I hated hearing it, but fuck, it gets easier. It gets easier. I remember early days in those meetings, they would read the 12 promises. And I thought, I've been sober for 3 or 4 months and none of that shit's happening. Like, this is bullshit. Like, I want my money back. Like, where's my 12 promises? And then I remember sitting there one day in a meeting and somebody said something about the obsession of the mind. And I looked at my phone and I was like, holy shit, like, fucking A, I haven't actually thought about drinking today. And that was probably 9 months of sobriety for me. And one more thing to say, do not be fooled by these people in these meetings that come in, blaze through the fucking 12 steps, and 3 months in, they're sponsoring 4 people and talking in meetings like they wrote the damn book. Because that right there almost drove me back out. Work your program, man. It took me a year to get through the steps. I just started again. Second time through, I'm in month 21. So take your time, lean on other people. You don't know how to regulate your nervous system. That's your problem. It's all of our problems. We don't know how to deal with that demand for dopamine spike. We don't know how to self-regulate our nervous system. That's where those affirmations come in. That's where the breathing comes in. That's where the meditation comes in. If you can work some of that into your routine, it will really help you. Because a lot of those suicidal thoughts and a lot of that difficulty is coming from dysregulation of your nervous system. And just taking a few deep breaths and saying some positive things to yourself and calling somebody in the program will drastically change how you feel. So just try to write those things down. Maybe those things could work for you. Write them down on a sticky note, tape it to the back of your phone, like with a bunch of Scotch tape, so it's like laminated to your phone. And just for the next few weeks, every time you're feeling like shit, just go do those 3 things. And I hope it works for you. I really do. So I know, again, long-winded, but you're gonna fucking get there. I promise you. This program, whatever program you're working, it works, and it's hard, and it's not you.
Do you have your recovery story published somewhere? Like, is it in your podcast? Like for example, the tools that you use. I know you've talked a lot about it on here, but
I wrote a blog post about 1 year of sobriety where I mentioned some of the things that I do. And then I wrote a blog post right before in March of in 2019. I was 5 months sober, just explaining my backstory a little bit, not in extreme detail, because that was some details you just, I don't know, you leave out. And, so I wrote that. And then episode 1 of the podcast is me boiling it down to about 10, 15 minutes telling the story. So there's a couple places where I put it, but some of those stories, like I've learned a lot since I published some of those things, and probably some of that stuff's not, some of the stuff that I just said probably isn't even in there.
okay, yeah, someone asked about that. So if you could share some of that with me after, that would be really awesome.
Yeah.
And I do want to go back to kind of how you were talking about yesterday. We think about our old life. And for me, I also sometimes think about, wow, I used to get on a plane every weekend or every other weekend and go to Europe and do all the things. And in sobriety, I haven't done that yet. And I almost feel like it's a grieving process to like grieve my old self. Do you identify with that or have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I have this euphoric recall sometimes, and then when it's over, I do sometimes sit there and go, the way it plays out in my mind, honestly, one of my mentors told me this is okay last Saturday. So one of my advisors for my fund, become a friend and a mentor, is this guy, Patrick Kennedy. He was a congressman for a while, Rhode Island, and he had to leave DC because he did a bunch of really gnarly shit because of addiction. And we were talking a couple Saturdays ago, and I told him this story. I said, dude, Patrick, there are days that I fantasize about going to Vegas, getting an 8-ball of Coke, a couple bottles of Tito's, a couple of prostitutes, and just fucking burning it down, cocaine, get some ecstasy, and just fucking party. And just the way I used to do it. And I said, and sometimes when I have that thought, I walk away from that when the craving goes away. I walk away going, there's no fucking way I will stay sober. I'm absolutely going to go back, but I'm just going to make it through fucking today. And he said, dude, you know what? He said, I've been sober for longer than you. And he goes, you know what I tell people? He said, I've gotten to the point where I don't expect long-term sobriety anymore. He said, I tell people I'm going to be sober today and tomorrow I'm getting fucked up. And when I have those thoughts in the last couple of weeks, I've said that to myself, and I'm like, I don't know. It takes this pressure off of me. When I put pressure on myself to think about maintaining long-term sobriety, it makes me want to drink. But when I think about just, you know what, man, I'm just going to fucking make it through today. I'm going to go try to help somebody, and I'll deal with tomorrow. Am I going to drink a year from now? Fuck, I don't know. I'm definitely not going to say no, because me saying no to that question puts me in a position where I don't feel good. So yeah, man, God, I wish I could drink sometimes. I wish I could party and rage and have a fucking great time in Vegas again. I crave it badly, but if I wait long enough, I'm able to do the math and realize that ends my life, and that my life's pretty good. I've got 2 little boys that are, they were too young to know what the fuck was going on. So all they'll ever know, if I don't go back out, all they'll ever know about their dad's addiction is that it was some shit he did before they knew what was going on. And they'll learn from it and hopefully be able to leverage it and not have to go through it. Relationship with my wife is good. Most of my family's good. I have friends for the first time in my life, actual friends, people who give a shit about me and don't want anything from me. So yeah, it's hard thinking about the past and dealing with that euphoric recall. But dude, back then I had no value for my life, which is why I wanted to take it. And it's why I tried to numb it away. And now I have value in my life, and I would never want to give it up. And I think maybe that might be the thing. That might be the thing that makes me hang on in the long run. But I get fucking terrified of the thought of staying sober for 10 years. It's an expectation. I fucking hate expectations. I hate commitment. It terrifies me. Like, I don't even want to commit to like being on a phone call tomorrow. Like, just call me when you want to talk. I don't want to schedule it. So that's how I feel. I think other people probably feel the same way. Go out there in the recovery community, find them, put them on your phone list, and call them when you feel like shit.
Make a list. Yeah. And have it when your brain's hijacking you and think that you're alone. I don't know. Do you ever feel like that? Does it
Totally fucking alone, man.
Yeah.
I feel like now I'm bipolar, and I have like, like I go through these cycles naturally. And so I deal with some paranoia and stuff, some weird shit. But so sometimes I don't ever feel as alone as I did though. Like, man, I felt like I was on a fucking island when I was out there. Like, the people, like, I'd go party with people, but I wore them. I was too much for them. They would never party with me again. And like the normal people in my life, they didn't want anything to do with me. I felt like I was on an island. And I still feel that way sometimes. I feel that way when I get rejected. I feel that way when I, I can't help myself. I've gotten better at it, but I go back and read some of the shit people have written about me on the internet, and I read the comment sections, and I'm just like, God damn, like, people hated me or do. It's hard, man. But yeah, I also benchmark myself when I do that to like see how negative my reaction is. It's the finance guy in me. Like, I want to see if I'm better than I was. But yeah, dude, I feel alone sometimes. But I built enough of the recovery community around me that I know I'm not. And so I never go 24 full hours feeling alone. And that's a big difference. I used to go weeks, months, whatever, years. And now, because I have some discipline in my life, and because I figured this thing out my second time through the book, in the very, very first part of the AA book, and this really blew me away recently going through it for the second time, but the first time in real detail. Bill Wilson goes to Akron, and he's telling Dr. Bob that he's been going around telling other alcoholics how to get well, and it doesn't work. And he's like, what the fuck? And Dr. Bob, and I'm elaborating a little bit because I've read other accounts of the story, but Dr. Bob looks at him and says, are you sober? He's like, yeah, I've been sober for, X amount of time. And that's when Bill goes, holy fucking shit. What Zach Williams said. Helping other people is the fucking key. So when you get well enough, which is pretty soon, I mean, just after detox and rehab, you're probably well enough. Find ways to help other people. You're probably, oh man, I hate saying this. This is a dangerous comment. You're probably not well enough or educated enough to sponsor someone in a program yet. But dude, you can volunteer, like you can go volunteer to the local jail teaching people English. Like there's shit you can do to help other human beings. You can go pass out food at a food bank. You can, there's stuff you could do that doesn't cost you any money. And I know COVID and all that shit. So I get it. Whatever. I get it. You can't do some things, but go help other people. There are ways to do it, and it will change your life.
I would love to, this is my question. I would love to ask you, has there been a moment in your recovery or an experience that you went through when you were like, fuck yeah, I'm in recovery and I'm going to fucking stay here?
Yeah, that happens far more often than feeling alone or feeling pissed or wanting to drink these days. Dude, it's just what I said about helping other people. When another guy comes to me, you know what I get a lot of, because I've spoken at my church. I go to one of these massive mega churches with like 40,000 people. And somehow, some way that, for whatever reason, they let me get up and talk in front of people. And I had the hardest time not saying fuck. Okay. It's my favorite word. So I mostly eliminate it. And I get up and tell my story. And you know what I get the most of, other than old ladies looking at me funny? I get dudes. They won't come up to me afterwards. 2 weeks later, this happens all the fucking time. This sounds so weird. 2 weeks later, I'll be hustling from Sunday school to church. And some guy will follow me into the bathroom and be like, yo, dude, the thing you said, like, I have that problem. Like they can't say it. They can't say that they're addicted to porn. They can't say strip club. They can't say prostitute. Like they can't get the fucking words out yet. And it's amazing. Like that, I fucking love that. Because I love grabbing a hold of one of those guys and saying, hey man, listen, if you want to get well, here's my phone number. Call me this afternoon. And some do, some don't. And some, when they call me, I say, this is what I want you to do. Like, this is my program. This is how I do it. And I will walk step by step with you through this. And I will go to the meetings with you. I will sit next to you. I will take you. I will babysit you until you get your feet underneath you, if you do it the way I tell you to do it. And some of them do it. And they get well. And they end up not getting that divorce. And they end up getting sober. And they end up, finding fucking freedom, not put an app on their phone and not download porn because someone will know. No, delete the app. Take the fucking fences down. Take the boundaries and the borders off your life. When you get free, you don't need that shit. I don't need that shit. I could walk into a restaurant. I'm not tempted to drink. I could drive down the highway and see the sign for the strip club. I'm not tempted to go. Sometimes I am, but usually not. I don't need borders and boundaries and fences in my life anymore most of the time. I mean, I still have precautions in my life. I don't put myself in stupid fucking situations, right? Like somebody wants to meet me for dinner. I don't go to the bar that also happens to be the place where all the tri-delts hang out from SMU. Like, I don't need to be around a bunch of fucking hot 23-year-olds. Like, it's a fucking problem for me. So I don't go there. But I don't have blocking things on my phone to block me from looking at certain shit either. I just don't look at it. I'm free. And when another fucking guy gets free and I help that, holy shit, that's good stuff. Like, that propels me in my recovery more than anything else. And so what I would say to Stephanie is grind out these early days, get well enough to help someone else, and then fucking do it with reckless abandon, and it will change your life.
Stephanie has one follow-up question that I think is perfect to ask you in this moment, because wow, you've given us so many amazing perspectives and ideas, and wow, I love this. She asks, are there any solid science resources for the brain, essentially, that you turn to when you're in the dark place?
Yes, I have one. So a guy on the board of my rehab center named Kevin McCauley, he was in the Navy as a flight surgeon, and he got thrown in prison in the Navy for stealing opioids from the supply group because he got addicted to it when he broke his collarbone. And when he was in prison, he started doing all this work around neural pathways. He has a 1-hour video. It's on YouTube. I have a link. I'll send you the link. It's dry. It is boring. He is fucking brutally boring. But this guy, the way he explains the neuroscience of addiction will blow your mind. Absolutely blow your mind. Then watch Johan Hari 15-minute TED Talk on what people get wrong about addiction. That one, that's all about the neuroscience of addiction, basically, and how loneliness is actually the issue. And then watch Brene Brown explain vulnerability. Watch her Netflix documentary on explaining why vulnerability matters. And then watch, oh shit. The fuck's his name? I'm going to blank. There's another guy. Oh God. I'll send it to you guys. There's
Yeah.
another guy, I'm blanking on his name, but he does an incredible YouTube video on like what's going on in the brain with addiction. And these guys are all explaining the neuroscience, and they're explaining exactly what's going on. Like the thing I needed from rehab was a psychoeducation. I needed to know why I did the shit. And that's what I got at rehab and 45 days of sobriety. I walked out of there with a little bit of a science understanding about what in the fuck was going on in my brain. And I needed that education. But yeah, I have some resources. I have some great stuff. It's boring, but if you watch it, the Kevin McCauley video, you'll watch it once and you'll like fall asleep. And then like a day later, you'll go, wait a second, I want to hear him say that one thing. And then for me, I ended up watching it like 20 times after that. It is just packed full of this, like, it's a 1 hour crash course from a PhD that knows why our brains make us do this shit.
Yes, we'll connect after this and I'll get all those links and post it in the Facebook group, because this is what it's all about, right? Expanding our horizons. I mean, it's one thing for someone at a treatment center to stand up there and say your brain's fucked up, but like to know the science behind it for us intellectuals is super important. I'm wondering, can you share with us any of these exciting startups in mental?
Oh yeah. Yeah. One's called Foresight Mental Health. We just invested in. They are building mental health clinics, both online and in person. But it's interesting. They're building clinics and treating people, which is great. But the purpose is to gather the largest database of clinical outcomes on the planet, so they can start figuring out what tech solutions work. And what biomarkers correlate to, will this drug work for someone? Can we measure someone's saliva to figure out which SSRI might work for them? And that's the kind of stuff they're trying to do. It's really fascinating, Oakland based. And then we invested in this one, and the press should come out this week on it. They raised a boatload of money, called MindStrong Health. It's so cool. So these guys have figured out that there's enough data. We touch our phone like 3,000 times a day, sometimes more, a lot more. Like, I think, Arielle, you probably touch yours a lot more because of all the social media stuff. And so the phone can tell a lot about how we touch it. Like, sounds weird, right? But like how hard I answer the phone, how hard I type, what I type, what I'm visiting, how loud I'm on the phone, like how I handle the phone. Anyway, these guys figured out that they could take all of that gyro and content data, anonymize it, feed it into an algorithm, and figure out if you are, for seriously mental ill, for people like me with bipolar, if my mood state's changing or not. And they validated it, and they clinically proved its accuracy. It is more accurate than a mammogram for detecting breast cancer, which is like one of the most accurate clinical diagnostics on the planet. So these guys they launched it, they raised a bunch of money, they got contracts with health insurers. So they went out and they got a bunch of Humana bipolar patients on the platform, and expecting for Humana to come back and say, well, our total expenditure on mental illness with these people went down because of you. And it did. And then they accidentally noticed that population, inside of the bipolar population, where there was a comorbidity with another disease, there was a 30 to 50% reduction in total healthcare costs. Simply because this algorithm said someone should call this guy and check in. So like that thing that you get to in recovery where you're like, I'm telling you, you need to reach out and call. These guys have found a way to tell somebody to reach out and call you because they know you need it. And they're starting with bipolar and schizophrenia, and they're eventually going to move into depression, anxiety, and then addiction. And it's earth-shattering how much money they save these insurance companies by putting people on this program. And these guys we got lucky to be in it, but like the co-investors in this are just, it's mind-boggling. Like Jeff Bezos is in it. If you know anything about venture, just like the first investor in Facebook is in it. The first investor in, a bunch of like Snapchat's in it. Like it's just incredible investors in this thing. So the stoke is high about that one. And my little new venture fund that is just, we didn't put as much in as everybody else. The CEO is doing press on it this week and he's announcing that we were in it. And it's just like, thank God, I need something to push some Google search results further down. So I'm pretty stoked about it. That's one. And then the last one I invested in is actually a faith-based app called pray.com. It's basically Calm, but it's faith-based. So it's like Bible meditations, faith content from some famous pastors and stuff. And they crank new content out all the time on their app. It's a daily prayer and meditation app that creates community within churches and also just engages with you individually. The lead investor in that deal is actually the lead investor and the chairman of the board at Calm. So that tells you something about it, that they think that Calm was missing a piece of the market, and these guys got it. 2.5 billion people on the planet identify as Judeo-Christian. It's a pretty big market. So growing like crazy. Incredible business. It's incubated by the same guys that incubated and built Dollar Shave Club. So they know how to build viral product. But we've got a couple more we're investing in or about to invest in right now. But that's what I've been up to.
Wow. This is like cutting edge stuff. I love hearing about all this. So Stephen, like, you have been such an amazing guest on here. I would like to hear about what you have planned. Like, what's down the pipe for Stephen Hayes? Where are we going to see you? What's going on? We want to all stay in touch. I'm speaking for the group now. We all want to stay in touch. How do we do that?
Happy to stay in touch. Happy to share my info. Man, I'm on this path that has a North Star, and I know where that is. But along the way, opportunities have come up, and I don't know exactly where it'll end up. I have been moving down this path of proving myself and proving my thesis and writing white papers on the mental health space and producing content on it so that I could raise a large venture cap. So go out and raise $100 million and then have a dedicated fund investing in these technologies like the one I just told you about that's going to basically be the thermometer of the brain. I want to invest in more of that. So I want to raise a bunch of money to do that. But the other day I've been in conversations to like Calm, the meditation app. Actually, they have more cash than they know what to do with. And they want to do some direct investing into startups. And they were asking me if I'd help them do that. So I might take 18 months and kind of run their investment vehicle. I might raise my own fund. I just don't know. I really don't know. There's all these like maybes and possiblies and it could happens. And dude, I don't know. Right now, what am I doing? I help investors put money into startups. I don't charge them any money until they make a profit. I don't make cash flow from that. The podcast is an expense. I don't make money from it. And I spend about 20, 30 hours a week as a finance freelance consultant on a freelancing website, helping people build models and pitch decks to raise money to pay my bills. And my next stage goal is to find a way to make the things I'm doing pay my bills so that I can stop distracting myself with all of that stuff. And there's some really cool opportunities right in front of me to make that happen. And I'm just going to keep plugging away and trying to get there. So yeah.
And the thing that comes up for me as you explain that, it's like sobriety has given you the space to have all these opportunities. Like, oh. So
my ego was really fucked up when I was drunk and when I was out. And when I was a venture capitalist during that time, I fancied myself as one of these VCs on Twitter that had a big following and people I thought I was a big deal. And my ego was just a shit show. And what sobriety has taught me is how to just remove my ego from everything. And when I'm out there doing these things now, as long as I can pay my bills and feed my wife and kids and pay my mortgage, I don't really care if anybody responds to the tweet. I don't really care if anybody downloads the podcast. If it helps somebody, that's great. And just being able to actually truly feel that way most of the time, sometimes I still have problems with my ego, but just to be able to be that way most of the time and to operate that way, I got to that. When I got to that place, I started getting the 12 promises. Things started falling into my lap that I could have, back before I got well, I would have fought for the opportunity and never gotten it. And now some of these opportunities are just coming into my inbox and presenting themselves. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? Are you serious? Like, I can't believe that. Okay, sure. Let's do it. So those promises come true, man. Like, and if you're not in the AA program, go read the 12 promises. Whatever program you're working, if you're working on yourself, those promises are going to come true for you. I fucking swear it. So I have no idea where I'm going in my life, but I'm going toward this thing that I think looks like what I described.
And you're moving forward. You're not staying stuck. And this has come up. There's people in this room that have heard me say this. Actually, I think I said it at a meeting last night. We become in alignment and we act like magnets for good things to happen to us. And what you just explained, I fully believe that that's happening for you. And it's just so cool to watch and hear and learn about your journey and how that's like, it's coming to fruition. It's just,
it's incredible, man. Like my sponsor introduces himself in AA meetings. He doesn't say his sobriety date. He just says, I'm blank, grateful alcoholic. And that's why I picked him to be my sponsor. I wanted to feel that way. I fucking hated recovery for a while. And that guy went to prison for bank robbery. He was in jail with Timothy McVeigh up in Oklahoma for years. The guy that blew up the thing in Oklahoma. And I don't know, man. He had something I wanted. And I'm now able to honestly say that, and it's not just some shit I heard someone say in a meeting, and so now I say it because it makes me look cool in meetings. I am so grateful that I get to live whatever percentage of my life is ahead of me like this. It was worth the bullshit I had to go through to get to live free. I think most people, I'm a big punk rock fan, always have been. I think most people in this world never experience freedom, ever. And the only way you can truly get it, it's not because you live in America. Fuck, you're not free here. You're in jail to your credit card company and your mortgage company. You're not fucking free. And they're listening to us. Like, you're not free. The only way to have freedom is to separate yourself from all of that. And sobriety and recovery has brought me freedom. Nothing owns me most of the time. And that's fucking cool.
fucking so cool. Thank you so much, Stephen, for being on here. I'm just looking at these faces. Everyone is like, I'm so grateful that, and I know I'm speaking for the rest of the group, for your time tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I loved it. This helps me. I love this. So thank you for having me.
Yeah,
and thank you for what you're doing. Like, you made a comment in the podcast that no one's heard yet. You basically said, I'm doing this for the people that fall through the cracks. And man, the system just doesn't work for everybody. And that's why half the people who need help don't even ask for it. And that doesn't even address the people who don't even know they need help. So there's a lot of cracks. A lot of people fall through, and the world needs people doing what you're doing. So thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you very much. So yes, I will communicate to my followers all of the links for you, and then the links that you talked about for, all those different videos that you suggest with the intellectuals. So we'll connect after or tomorrow or sometime. And yes, thank you, Stephen. I hope that everyone who's watching, you guys all have a good rest of your night. And yeah, you'll be seeing more of Stephen on My Sober Compass in some capacity. I'm sure of it. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye, Stephen.
Bye.